Hello, I'm Gerard Brumfield, and I am the Director of College Ministry at First Presbyterian Church in downtown Fresno, and I am here to welcome you to Work Matters 2021. Over the last 2 years, we have been planning a conference about why our work matters. And friends, we are finally here, and I am so excited. This idea came about as I was talking with some friends about what would it mean if we were to gather people gather people in Fresno to talk about the purpose and the meaning behind our work. Working with college students, it is so important for college students to know why they are going to be called to do fantastic things like being doctors and lawyers and teachers and all these different things. But I was also thinking that beyond just those types of careers, like what does it look like for the blue collar worker, the person who's fixing the roads and those who are greeting us at front desks, knowing that all those jobs matter and we're all doing it together. What does it look like for us to come together and understand the deeper purpose behind it? That maybe it's more than just a paycheck. Maybe it's more than just us spending time doing something with our hands. But maybe there's a deeper purpose and meaning behind what we're doing. And friends, I hope that over the course of the next few videos that you are able to go on this adventure with us of understanding what our work is meant to do. So what's going to happen? Today, there are going to be 3 different videos. The first video, we're going to have a chance to hear from some speakers and a panel. And then the second video, we're going to have some quick talks. And those quick talks are 3 really special speakers who are going to give us some insight about what they're doing and how they found purpose and meaning in their work. In our last session, we're going to have a really cool opportunity of hearing from a friend who is in Spokane, Washington, and the work that he has done to care for those in the service industry jobs. So sit back and relax and enjoy this time together. All right, friends, let me introduce you to our first speaker, Jake Soberall. As CEO and co-founder of Bitwise Industries, Jake Soberall leads the organization in vision casting, real estate development, new and strategic initiatives, and rallying people around the Bitwise vision. And when he's not ensuring Bitwise plays a meaningful part in Fresno's future, he enjoys spending time with his family, working in his yard, or running. The best part of his role as CEO, he says, is helping people to the belief that the Bitwise vision is possible, that Fresno can do things that are exciting and important. Here's Jake.
Hi there. My name is Jake Soberall, and I am glad to get to share with you today at this 2021 Work Matters conference. While I would have much preferred to have you all actually over there, I am left alone in an empty room. Nonetheless encouraged that at some point this video is going to meet with you out there in real time, and I hope that it's an encouragement to you. I was glad for the invitation today to share a bit about how my love of Jesus gave way to a love of Fresno, and ultimately a wonderful opportunity to express each of those things in the work that I get to do. I wanted to begin by unpacking a little bit of this really, really wonderful story that I've gotten to live. Many of you know that I am the co-founder of Bitwise Industries, which is headquartered in downtown Fresno. And the work that we do at Bitwise, whether you're familiar with it or not, is to connect people to the skills they need to access opportunity in the technology industry, believing that the effect of that work will be to catalyze technology growth, technology economy around new talent in downtown Fresno. Non-obvious there is that we train almost exclusively people coming from a story of being historically disenfranchised or of systemic poverty, and so folks that would not ordinarily expect a tech job, a high growth, high wage job to be a part of their story or future. But that's kind of the end of the story. The story begins in a different place. You see, my first interaction with the technology industry was not through Bitwise as the founder of a startup, but rather through my father and really in his story. My grandmother came here from Mexico and built a life for herself in Los Angeles. Very poor, raised my father there, she a seamstress, and my grandfather an ice cream man. There was no part of her story that suggested mine. Nonetheless, my father was raised there in East Los Angeles, living in poverty. And it was a bit later in his story where he found himself working as a night watch security guard at a hospital clinic in Los Angeles, and was forced by virtue of his job to beat someone up. He had to protect the facility, and somebody was unfortunately under the influence and needed to be taken care of. And so my dad had that weighing on him, and at the end of his shift went home, and sitting in his apartment, he flips on the television and quickly pops on a commercial for a thing called the Computer Learning Center. And that commercial told him many things, but what he heard is that he could go to this place and learn to computer, and that would connect him to a job. As he tells the story, the things that stuck out to him are that he could get a job that paid much better, that place where the commercial was being filmed appeared to have air conditioning, a big plus, and he thought the lady on the commercial was quite pretty. And that commercial was what caused my father to ultimately pursue opportunity and skill in the technology industry at the Computer Learning Center. That commercial, as serendipitous as it might be, was an inflection point in my father's life. And in fact, an inflection point in my life, even though I wasn't yet a glimmer in his eye. He became a computer programmer as a consequence of that moment. And later on, that moment is what made it possible for my siblings and I to enjoy a very different sort of opportunity than what would have been assumed for my father. You see, much later, my family would move to Fresno. Coincidentally, knowing the end of the story, my father had an opportunity to take an exciting tech job in Fresno, and for him, that also meant being able to get a new start for his family, an exciting new chapter for us in a town that felt to him really safe, the sort of place that he imagined being able to raise his family. And so we moved to Fresno, and ultimately it was a really wonderful place to grow up. I went to Clovis High School, and I was the kid that loved it. I loved going to the sports and being involved in the student newspaper and all of the rest, and benefited from it greatly. But I had this abiding sort of knowledge in me that I was not going to stay. I needed to get away. The sort of opportunity that I longed for, that was on my heart, it existed other places. You didn't find that sort of thing in Clovis or Fresno, was my sort of rose-colored glasses, 18-year-old belief. I remember, so I gave the high school graduation speech at Clovis High School, not because I was the valedictorian, but because I knew my parents would assume I was the valedictorian if I gave the high school graduation speech. The trick didn't last long, but anyway, I give the speech, and I can remember standing there in La Monica Stadium thinking, you know, these folks, they ought to enjoy this because I will never be back here again. The wisdom of my teenage self. And I had the opportunity to bounce around the country for college and experience before landing in Los Angeles for law school. And at some point in that law school journey, I decided that I wanted to be a district attorney. And it was really born of a desire to put bad guys in jail, to have that dramatic courtroom moment where you had the winning argument. It was a very romantic image. And so I went to, as a law school student, apply to be a clerk at the DA's office, only to learn that it wasn't until after your second year of law school, when you took evidence, that you could get a clerkship at the district attorney's office. Sort of a bit deterred, but still determined, I quickly learned that at the public defender's office, you could get a job as a clerk without evidence. And so I quickly signed up and was selected. it's important to understand, clerking at the public defender's office, there's sort of this hierarchy of opportunity. You get assigned to a certain division in a certain courthouse, and sort of at the top was being in the downtown center, the place that we all know from where O.J. Simpson's trial took place, and you doing capital cases or something important. And for me, the very least opportunity was working in juvenile court. Of course, because God has both intentionality and a sense of humor, I was assigned to the juvenile court in Watts. And what I didn't know is that as a law student, because of the fact that individuals who are convicted of crimes before they turn 18 are released at 18, that you don't actually have to be an attorney, only a certified law student, to represent them. And so the uniqueness of being placed at the Juvenile Justice Center in Watts was that I would actually get to try cases on behalf of the young people who found themselves in those courtrooms. And very quickly, you wind up in these interview rooms. And a number of things that I didn't expect began to unfold in front of me. And born of my own naivete, for sure, every single person that sat across the table from me was black or brown. And the assumptions that I'd been raised in, that if you find yourself in the seats that they were in, it was because of your choices, maybe because you didn't have resources. But how wrong I was. What I didn't expect to realize was there weren't subtle differences between the people across the table's circumstances and mine. They might as well have been living on completely different planets in terms of the opportunity and privilege that was deeply ingrained in my story and nowhere to be found in theirs. And there was this sense there in the middle of that table that this was undeniably inequitable, that this was wrong, that something had to be done. I didn't know what to do with it, but it was unknown to me at that moment in time that what was unfolding in those interview rooms and in those courtrooms and in that clerkship would be a foundational experience forming me and the heart that I would eventually come to have. After law school, my wife and I, chose to return back to Fresno. Now, in so many stories, that makes a lot of sense. In mine, it made none. The sort of law that I had ultimately decided to practice wasn't widely practiced in Fresno. The sort of grandeur that I had envisioned for my career wasn't widely experienced in Fresno. But a unique set of circumstances led both my wife and I to feel as though we had this unavoidable calling. We needed to be back in Fresno. Fresno was home. And so I didn't know what to do with that yet. But we returned and came back to town, and I dug in as an attorney and began to try and get involved in the community. And I was very quickly drawn to a handful of things that gave language, I think, to some things that had been forming up in my heart. The first was downtown. I was super inspired by the things that I was hearing from then Mayor Swearingen, and wanted to be a part of that, this more hopeful and exciting future, and came to believe through really a master's education from her and others that if we wanted to have a robust economy at the center of our city, that if we wanted to have prosperity, the sorts of wonderful, exciting, beautiful things in our city that many of us long for, it had to begin downtown, that the infrastructure of a city's center and urban core had a unique relationship to its economy. And that really excited me, this idea of revitalization and economic development. But then beside that sort of began to form up another set of things, and that was this realization that the things that I was picturing in a revitalized downtown, the jobs that I was imagining in a developed Fresno economy, they weren't for the folks living at the edges of our county doing farm labor. They weren't for the poor. They weren't for the folks that are never invited to the party. And those two things formed up a wrestle. I got to be involved initially in a number of really exciting things. The I Believe in Downtown Fresno campaign, the Boomerang Project, 59 Days of Code. And along this journey, I intersected with Irma Olguin, who is the co-founder of Bitwise Industries, and a dear friend. And she and I realized a shared love of Fresno, but also this really exciting reality that there's two people relatively new in their career who had a really audacious vision of what they could accomplish in their hometown in Fresno, and who believed deeply in each other as we developed that friendship. We both sort of believed that the other could do that audacious thing that they were describing, and began to really desire to do that together. And it was in that season where Irma and I began staying up late at night after we finished our day jobs and imagining, how could we use this industry that was in front of she and I? She was an engineer and entrepreneur. I was an intellectual property attorney, and so that industry was the technology industry. How could we use that to not only revitalize downtown, but put a new class of technology workers at the center of our downtown that was driving that economic renaissance, and that, most importantly, looked like our county, where the son of migrant farm labor could find their way into opportunity in the technology industry, where the daughter of somebody who grew up with a manufacturing job that was not high growth, high wage could find their way into a technology job, where the individual from the LGBTQ plus community could find their way into a place that included, accepted, that loved them in the technology industry. How could we tell a story where the technology industry was put to work in a way that equitably transformed our city by transforming individual lives, such that then in the aggregate of those individual transformed lives, you began to transform the macro of our economy? And then, as now, the vision was really in three parts. What if we taught people the skills they needed to access opportunity in the technology economy? And acknowledge that when you're coming from a story of poverty or exclusion, it's not the JavaScript or the Python or any hard skill that is standing in your way. It is that you don't have a ride to class. And you can't afford class, and that you need a paycheck, and so you can't take time off of work. You need somebody to watch the kids, you need food, you need all of the non-technical barriers to entry that ultimately keep people where they are and keep them from opportunity like that in technology. And so we said, what if we combine that with the skills training so that we could actually access the brilliance that has not been invited to the party in the tech economy before? And so that is what we call broadly workforce. We teach people those skills and support them in those ways. The second is what we call industry. What if we traced a meaningful, reliable, and real line from the beginning of that learning journey to a tech job that allowed you to double, triple, quadruple your earnings, that allowed you to care not only for your family, but perhaps your folks or your grandparents, that changed, just like that commercial for me, that changed what might be the outlook for your kids. And then third, how do we center that work in our city such that it actually causes widespread benefit, widespread lift for Fresno? And for us, that meant, how do we create this sort of vibrant places at the center of our city that people assume exist in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco, New York, Los Angeles, but would never expect to find in Fresno? How do we create the castles for this work such that we can hand the keys to that first night student or to that entrepreneur that has believed their experience here in Fresno to be less than, or to any other person who has felt outside looking in when it comes to the tech economy, when it comes to what they believe is possible for themselves and their city. And those are the buildings you now see today in downtown Fresno. That journey began almost 9 years ago now, and we have no doubt been able to live out a really exciting extension of those early visions in the center of our city. I feel privileged to do that. I feel like, even as you say, 8 years into this, that feels like a long time. It feels like there's more of that journey ahead of us than behind us. But as I tell that story, I am reminded in that winding path how easy it is to lose sight of the intentionality that is in all of our stories. And so I thought I might draw us back to two passages that are formative for me and are really a strengthening reminder of what God is doing in our city. The first is Acts 17, where we're told directly that God has designed an exact time and an exact place where we are living right now. This is not by accident. He put us here in this location, in this moment, purposefully. And then I'm drawn to Jeremiah 29, where God shows us there through Nebuchadnezzar that he is working through social forces to put us in a place where he has for us and for that place a good plan. And that is so encouraging that we are not here for something mundane, that we're not here for something worldly. We are here for something that is beautiful, something that is divinely appointed, and something that is good and purposefully. As I tell my story, I remember and recall in each of those moments that it was sometimes unclear and even frustrating as it was unfolding. My family wasn't allowed to have access to prosperity in the way that it ultimately wound up having access to prosperity. I didn't want to build a career in Fresno. It isn't always easy to love Fresno, almost rebelling against the story as it was unfolding. But God had a good plan for me. He gave me a heart for justice and the marginalized through my grandmother and my father, and through that experience in the Watts Juvenile Justice Center. He gave me a vision for a prosperous, exciting, a beautiful, a wonderful Fresno, whether it began in the I Believe in Downtown Fresno campaign, or before that, coming back to Fresno, or after that, the vision of what might be possible for Bitwise. And he has been faithful to resource just richly the work that we're doing at Bitwise that is working towards a good end in a city that he loves. And that's not to say that it's always going to be plenty, but he has met us in that work in a powerful way that serves as affirmation that he has a good plan for this place, and he has something for each of us in that plan. I think if we look at the place where we are and don't see and seek God's good plan in and for it, that a couple of things are happening. We are rebelling against that good plan and God's authority over us. And we are missing out, and this is so important, we are missing out on that good plan that God has and all of the awesome things that he has for us in that plan, in this place. It's as though we're choosing a lesser version of our city, of the history unfolding in it, than the one that God has set aside for us, than the one that he's called us to. I hope you can hear me in that and be encouraged by the promise that God has a good plan for Fresno, and you have an important role in bringing it to be. And I couldn't be more excited than to work alongside each of you in exactly that. Thank you.
Jake, thank you so much for sharing your heart with us about why you care for Fresno and why you're caring to invest in this spot. And friends, I want to introduce you to 4 more people who have such a heart for Fresno as well, that they're going to tell us how they are bringing meaning to their work in this season of life. So here's our panelists. Hello, friends, and welcome to this panel that we're going to have with some pretty stellar folks. I want you to know that I've been looking forward to this moment for a good year and a half. And to have this moment to talk to some, in my opinion, some of the greatest things Fresno has to offer to us. And so I am looking forward to introducing you to some of my friends. And let me tell you why we're doing this panel. We're doing this panel because we know that great things are happening all over the place. And sometimes we feel this need that it has to be somewhere else, or we have to do it in another way. Well, at this time, we're going to know that that is not always the case. Sometimes you can just do it in the place that you grew up. Sometimes you can do it in the place that you can call this Fresno home. And so these 4 friends who I'm about to introduce to you are folks who are living out their calling and their passion for their city and for their work right here in Fresno. And so let me introduce you to our 4 panelists. First, we have Bert Aguilar. Bert is the operations manager at Tioga Sequoia Brewing Company, located in downtown Fresno, where Bert bridges the gap between production, sales, and tap room, preparing for future company growth and expansion. Before becoming the operations manager, Bert started as a part-time bartender in the newly opened Tioga Beer Garden. He has worked his way up in the company over the last 7 years, taking on roles in marketing, graphic design, and office manager, sorry. Bert was born and raised here in Fresno, California, attended Fresno State, majoring in computer science. In his free time, Bert loves traveling to the mountains for day hikes with his wife and 2 sons. And next, we have Kaylin Roberts, who also has a beautiful voice, but you can get that on another time. Kaylin holds a BA from Fresno Pacific University and has worked in agriculture in the Central Valley for nearly a decade. Her primary role at Prima Wawona is to breed high quality stone fruit for the health and enjoyment of all. She is also currently serving on the Evangel Home board. In her spare time, Kayla enjoys singing, hiking, and caffeinating with friends. And next we have Saya Lumea, who was born and raised in Kinshasa, the Democratic Republic of Congo, and moved to Fresno in 2006. He earned a Bachelor of Arts degree in criminal justice from Fresno Pacific University in 2010. Saya currently serves as the director of the Victim Offender Reconciliation Program at the Central Justice Center. He joined the VORP staff in 2011 after college and has since worked in a variety of capacities. Saya has completed his degree in conflict studies, master's degree in conflict studies and mediation, and is married to Katie Lumea.
That's great.
And next we have our friend Pauline Cleaver. She has 6 older siblings and she effectively has 8 parents. She also has 2 children and 3 grandchildren. She's a nurse by profession and spent over 40 years as a nurse educator and administrator. She accepted Christ as her Savior at the age of 10 and has been an active member of the Mennonite, Methodist, Baptist, and Presbyterian Church. She is too logical for her own good, and she spent 3 years in Japan doing student evangelism and 1 year in Germany, mainly as a Hausfrau. Hausfrau. Okay, that's fun. But also discipled college girls. Currently, she is a farmer. She grows flowers, weeds, fruit, vegetables, grapes, and berries. Friends, this is our panel. So, friends, first, I would love for each of you to tell us a little bit about the career that you're chosen, or even in retirement now, Pauline, and how you have seen the importance of your work right now. Saya, would you mind starting us?
Yes, that's fine. Can you just repeat the first question again?
Yes, the importance of your current job. How have you seen that and the importance of your work?
Okay. Thank you for having me part of this panel. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes, sir.
Okay. My name is Saya. My first name is Zashi, but I noticed that it's much easier for people to say Saya than Zashi. So I tend to go by Saya because it's easier. And then, as you said it, I am originally from Congo. Moved here in 2010 and 2006, but I've since been here. And I am part of the Community Justice Center, which is a new center in town that does mediation for the community. The importance of work, I think on a personal note, I would say that I am very privileged, I should say, to participate in a human drama, human drama that happens every day in our community. And what fulfills me, I think it's always to see reconciliation, the opportunity of reconciliation in the midst of that drama. Mm-hmm. It is hard working with people who are in conflict because conflict is hard to handle to some extent. And then just being able to be invited into that space and to be able to offer something that can lead people to see each other in a different and better way, to me, that fulfills me, and that gives me a purpose, and then it keeps me also grounded. So that's how I should say, your friend.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
How about you, Pauline? How have you seen this life of retirement or repurposement, as some would say? How have you seen the importance of it?
I think it's a wonderful time to move from doing to being,
Mm,
because, when you've got a family and you're working full time, you're just chugging along.
yeah,
Whereas it's been a time to sort of stop and reflect and say, who do you really want to be? And it's been a wonderful time to have more time to listen.
yeah,
And I notice as my son has teenagers that give him grief, uh, he needs mom to listen a little more. I don't have to say anything because, they don't want advice at this point,
yeah,
but you get to listen more. One of the great things about COVID has been that, I live alone, so there's nobody else to talk to. So you talk to God a lot.
yeah,
And that's been wonderful.
yeah.
And I also have time, not just for my children, but
Mhm.
also for other people who, sort of need somebody to come alongside and listen to them. And I've got extra time to do that. And it's been wonderful.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. I love that piece when you said like moving from doing to being. I think so often, I think that in myself, I just want to do all the time. So I even think like, yeah, what does it look like in everyday life to go from doing to being? Yeah. Thank you, Pauline. Appreciate that. Bert, how about you, my brother?
Well, you know, my current career, I never really thought that I would be where I'm at this point in time.
Okay.
Originally, I thought I was going to be, in computers somewhere, whether it's a software developer or a hardware engineer of some sort. And um, I there was a moment in my life after I graduated college where I kind of was kicked in the teeth a little bit and was trying to figure out like where I wanted to move on next. And so I took a little time and stumbled upon working as a part-time bartender at Tioga Sequoia Brewing Company.
Hmm.
And through my um, own interest in craft beer, wanting to work for a brewery, I didn't know how that worked for me. I didn't really brew beer. I barely knew how to serve beer, but I knew how to talk about beer and knew how to talk to people. And throughout the years, I've been able to meet a lot of really interesting people, a lot of friends as well that I still have today through just craft beer itself. And the company itself has really grown as a community staple in downtown Fresno. And I think that's really where what I've really gravitated towards over the years. Um, we've really grown as a small beer garden and open 3 days a week. Now we're open almost every day, well, when we can, given COVID. But
Hmm.
we've grown our space to be a community space for the people around downtown Fresno and all around the surrounding areas. And before COVID, we were ramping up to, we had annual events where we would have thousands of people join and celebrate the arts,
Hmm.
not just craft beer, but the arts, the community, vendors, food trucks. We're just a really big staple for downtown, and that's really what I'm proud of and what we do.
Yeah.
But on top of that, we're also reaching out to the community at large, for mainly in our own backyard in the national park, Yosemite and Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Park. We have a pretty big presence there, and we
Yeah.
try our best to support organizations in those areas.
Yeah. Cool. As a college director, I love when you're saying that you had to change your mind of what you're going to do after graduating. It's like I thought I was
Hmm.
going to work in computers, but now this is where I ended up, and then I had to work myself up from the bottom to now. Like I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
that's pretty incredible. This idea of just staying faithful even where you are. That's awesome. I hope I didn't take your line from later. But Kaylin, my friend, tell us about why do you think the importance you see in your work right now?
Yeah. I'm glad you like the story of your mind getting changed after graduation.
Yeah.
I have a similar kind of story wherein as I graduated from Fresno Pacific, I took some time. I had been working while I was going to school. It was all very hectic, and I took a few days at the end of my graduation, and I prayed over a list as I was going into nursing prerequisites, thinking I would be a nurse like Pauline, and I prayed over a list that I had made, and on one side I had passion, and one side I have proclivities, and I just said, Lord, I have no idea how these two things match up, but you made me, and you know where this fits, and if it's nursing, then I'll pursue it, and if it's something else, you're gonna have to tell me because this is wide and varied, and a few years later, I ended up with the call for this very job, which is a very unique space to work in. Agriculture is large, of course, but variety development is a smaller segment of agriculture. And one of the things that I really appreciate about it, and I think is important about it, is everybody needs and wants good tasting and nutritional food. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
everybody wants food. And stone fruit, peaches, nectarines, apricots, cherries, etc. Those were always my favorite category, even as a kid. And so I thought, wow, even in the small things, I felt like God gave me a gift in this job. So, and I've had an incredible mentor as well. But I think that's probably the most one of the most important things about it is just that I have felt so led there, and that it impacts really what you get in the grocery store. What I do many years later ends up being what you eat.
Yeah. 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 That's incredible. Kayla, I want to ask a question of the field that you're in is very like male dominated, right? And I feel like, and I think I find a lot of joy in knowing of like Kaylin is changing the game in this space. What does that look like for you? Even this idea of making space and making room in this field.
Well, I was gifted as a child with having all older brother and cousins and neighborhood children around
Yeah.
me. I am very used to being surrounded by, well, older men, basically, which is the population that I generally work with in ag. And you know, it sounds sometimes more contentious than it actually is. I felt very welcomed into this space a number of times, and there are other times that you kind of have to make somebody shake your hand, and they do because it's the appropriate thing to do, and you move on. So
Yeah.
I'm thankful for mentorship and advocacy from some titans in stone fruit, and the ones that don't, you know, you try to win them over. You try to find common ground and good rapport, and you just can't win them all. So the ability to shake that off a little bit and just say, you know, Lord, you brought me here, and if you want me here, then this is where I'll be.
Yeah.
And to that call and just kind of shrug the other stuff off as much as you can.
Yeah.
So.
So as she was talking, I was thinking about how in this field of like your master's in conflict resolution and you're working in reconciliation and all these things, like how I'm sorry I didn't prepare you for this moment, but how do you even begin to see like in the field that you're working in, how we begin to reconcile across different spaces to make in the work that you're doing? How have you seen that play out?
Yeah, very good. You know, and in this field of work, in reconciliation, mediation, the type of work that I do, it takes a toll, to be honest. You know, you sometimes you're working with people who have been in conflict for years, 10 years of conflict. I've seen people who have been been in conflict after a decade, and then they come to you and wanting to reconcile. And then sometimes, you know, people are not even at the point where they believe reconciliation is even possible. So yeah, you see you see them all. You see all types, and then what really does, at least from my perspective, is it takes a lot of patience. It really takes a lot of patience from my end, and then it takes also a lot of encouraging from me to the parties that I'm working with. But one thing that I always carry with me as I meet people, as I meet parties, I just to remind them that reconciliation is possible. It is often possible, and as hard the situation may be, as hard as conflict can be, and now maybe discouraging the conflict can also be, there is also a window of opportunity that if people believe in it and really take full advantage of it, reconciliation becomes possible. So that's kind of how I come along people by supporting them, not necessarily by telling them what they need to do, but just by uplifting them and encouraging them and validating them, and then just to remind them that quite often, more often than they can even imagine, that reconciliation is very possible.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. So the name of our conference this year, and I guess if we ever do it again, might be the same name, is Work Matters. Bert, would you tell us why you like? Why does that resonate with you? What do you think about that? How does that sit with you?
Yeah, does work matter?
Yeah.
Definitely. I think it definitely matters for sure.
Yeah.
But more than that, I mean, oftentimes, I see it here and there, people just kind of go to work and then they punch in, punch out and go home, and for me, that's never really been sort of the thing that I settled for. I've always tried to find fun aspects of work in general, but at the same time, like we work with the same people day in, day out, every single day. How can we make our interactions together just entertaining and fun and still have a purpose to, create an event or, create the next beer label or how are we going to reach out to further markets? We still have to talk to these people every single day. And so oftentimes, like in my own job, like I'm dealing with a lot of different personalities.
Yeah.
And so the thing that I often try to work towards is how can we all work together on one thing with all of these different inputs and personalities and emotions, even because we're all very passionate people with what we do at work. And how can we just combine all that together and get the outcome that we're looking for? And to me, like just listening to the other person's perspective is really what matters in so many different ways. And oftentimes, like even like the lowest of the low employee that just serves beer, like sometimes they have an opinion and it needs to be heard. And I really make it a point to try to connect with those folks at work and make sure that they understand that their thoughts and words also matter.
Yeah.
And we've actually had quite a few different things over the years, ideas and sort of policies that have just kind of come from the bottom up.
Yeah.
And that's really what I like about what I do. It's very vague, but
no, not vague for me. Like I love this idea of affirming the dignity of all the workers in the space.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that you're making sure that no matter what position you hold is a position of importance in the organization. And I love that view because I don't think it's just being no matter what role you're in, like every role matters. All of our work matters. How do we begin to bring creativity and passion to that? And so I appreciate that is a part of your organization. Pauline, in this on the same vein, you are in a different season of work. And we talked a little bit about that you just like this now you have this new thought of just being instead of doing. But why do you believe work matters?
I think, number one, work is a gift from God. To be able to express ourselves and to sort of help the world become the place that God wanted it to be. Because it's very clear to me that, the story of Adam and Eve, that God created man perfect, but not self-sufficient. And
write that down.
Well, I'm sorry to lay that on you. It's really heavy.
Wow.
But one of my favorite definitions of nursing is to help people do things that they would ordinarily do from themselves, but currently can't. And I think that doesn't stop at a hospital door, or no matter whether you're being paid for doing this or not. Looking around and saying, how can I help these people do things? And it can be, as simple as somebody called me a while ago and said, couldn't figure out how to put in his eye drops. He'd had eye surgery, couldn't figure out how to put in the eye drops. To help him put in his eye drops, teach him how to do that and the schedule and all of that. To, during COVID, the most complicated is to help somebody breathe when they can't on a ventilator. So it's all of those. And then I actually went into nursing education mostly because then my schedule was more aligned with my kids' schedule, and we had some of the same times off. And I found that sort of helped me look at bringing out the best in people.
Yeah.
How can you bring out the best in these people and help them to be the best that they can possibly be?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Wow.
And I think one of the happiest moments of my life was I was in a hospital. My husband had just had, one of these overnight surgeries, and I was going to pick him up after he was awake. And this gentleman came up to me and threw his arms around me and said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you." And I sort of looked back and I recognized him. And he'd been one of my students at Fresno State.
Yeah.
And he said, "You're the reason I'm a nurse." And I'm sort of looking at him and thinking, okay, people ask me about students and I say, if I remember them too well, they were in trouble too often. And so he said, "I was in your office one day and I was going to drop out because I was discouraged with what was happening. And you talked to me and said, don't do that. And made me think this through." And he says, "And I love what I'm doing and it's all your fault." And those are one of those times when you say, okay, what you've done is not just helped other people, but sort of multiplied yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of what God put us here for, is to help other people be the best that they can be.
Yeah.
Which is both what we do in nursing and what we do in education, and hopefully what we do in administration, which that doesn't always happen. You've all had the Boston now, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah. How about you, Kaylin and Saya? What do you guys think? Why does work matter to you?
I think work matters to me because, like Pauline said, I mean, you have these God-given gifts, and He does expect you to use them. And you spend so much of your time at work. Like, what else are you going to do? I mean, you're just doing those things. And really, when you're looking for those opportunities, I mean, maybe outside of even your job responsibilities, there are opportunities to connect with people in ways that will surprise even you sometimes. I think there's curiosity and creativity and community that is built in workplaces in the best, under the best circumstances. I know sometimes that's not always the case, but in the healthiest, and even when it's not, I feel like part of my role in work has been to try to bring some of that into a workplace. So I think those are my three favorite things about work and why.
Perfect.
Yeah. No, thank you. I think for me, it's just like Pauline said, and even Kayla, that work is God gift, and then with God gift, you cannot be stingy about it. You have to spread it. You have to share it.
Yeah.
So when we work because we imitate God. God worked, and when He created Adam and then put him in the garden, and Eve, he asked them to work. So, and to me, by working, it's not only that we empower ourselves, but we also empower others by the work that we do, and that's a privilege, I should say. For me, it comes in the form that when I get the phone call from a youth, from a family after the court hearing, try to say, hey, sometimes they can't even pronounce my name. They're like, hey, Saya, thank you. My case was dismissed. Thank you so much for working with me. Thank you so much for assisting me. Thank you so much for helping me, being accountable. And for victims, I think for them, it's just this sense of justice that they have been restored. And when they do call me, it's like, hey, thank you for your service, thank you for what you do, and thank you for allowing me to be part of this. And to me, that's when I see really work matters. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. This really cool thing that you all are saying is that like God intentionally has given us a way to bring hope and peace and reconciliation and back into the world. And you are all, each of you, doing that in the field that you were in or are in, and that's really beautiful. Which leads me into this next question, which I would love for you all to answer. It's like right now in your work, how are you seeing? Because God has called us to also then invest back into the places that we live, right? It's not just
Mm,
to go to work and then hoard ourselves away. So how do you see yourself investing back into Fresno?
mm.
I didn't call anyone, but whoever wants to go first, be my guest.
Well, for us, it's been really tough with COVID because our community space that really we've been building up over the years in downtown Fresno, we just have not been able to operate like we used to. You know, there's a lot of restrictions, especially on breweries. Actually, as soon as this week, the restrictions on breweries itself have been so strict that we weren't even able to serve on site without even serving a meal, which, those are the guidelines. So we followed them to the best of our ability by partnering with local food trucks.
Mm,
And those are starting to lift slowly. We're now able to kind of get back to more or less how we used to be on slower times. But beyond that, we've done quite a bit of different things with the surrounding community. One of the biggest major events that happened in the mountains is the fire that just happened in Shaver.
Mm.
We took that moment and um, sought out what we could do to help the shaver community. And so we created a beer just for that community, and we are still producing that beer and are donating portions of the proceeds to that community. Um,
wow.
and it's the Creek Fire Relief beer that we have. It's called Forest Strong. We do all kinds of other events. For example, another one we're actually doing now is we're partnering with Full Circle Brewing Company and donating money for a blood drive. And
Mm,
so Full Circle is a new neighbor of ours. They're opening up a new tap room right behind us, and that whole little corner of downtown Fresno is now dubbed the Brewery District, where we have other breweries that are also sort of joining in to kind of have a little community of for people to come enjoy themselves really. But we're really trying to capitalize on being an outreach for the community and in those aspects by partnering with our neighbors. There's a number of other charities that we donate to as well, especially in the national parks. Um, but that's one way that we found that we want to give back to our community. Um, and Fresno is such a big part of our identity as a whole. So we really try to celebrate as much of Fresno as we can. And that's the
mhm,
whole
Mm.
reason why we have an annual party called Fres Yes Fest, which originally started off as our anniversary party and has grown to be, well, in normal times, we had about 18,000 people in front of our brewery at one point. So
mhm,
we hope to get back to um, those types of events, obviously in a safe way, but also in a way where we can have the community come out as a whole and feel celebrated in some way because there's a lot to there's a lot to be proud of in Fresno. There's so many different people um, that there's so many different businesses and people that just really do everything for the community. And,
mhm.
um, that's one of the little highlights about being in downtown Fresno as a whole. Like, there's so many people that want to do great things. And
Yeah.
so I really think that we've really kind of excelled to that next level to get people more aware of downtown Fresno and get people to move down more and grow that community as a whole.
Cool. One of the things you said that I really appreciate is that you said there are other breweries coming to where you guys are, but instead
Hmm.
of like we need to up our game up to be better than. It's like we are partnering with them, right? And I'm sure there's
Yeah,
some
no,
competition about time,
absolutely.
but I still think the appreciation of like we are in this together because we are caring for our city together is a beautiful thing. That's awesome.
Yeah, no, for
Mhm.
sure.
Yeah,
Hmm.
cool. Thanks for anyone else?
I think for as an organization, we're a really Prima Wawona is a huge employer of people throughout the Central Valley. I mean, it's Fresno and surrounding communities, which I mean is always a good thing. It's nice when there's employment options, and it goes all the way, from seasonal and temporary and permanent. And so I'm thankful to be at an organization that wants to find good employees, wants to build into good employees. Um, and I think personally, not only do I like to be a part of a company that does that, but I've always loved Fresno. I've grown up in Fresno, and I started working with Evangel Home when I was doing an internship with the Pink House just out of college, and that just has always stuck with me. So that's a shelter for women and children, and has some alternative sentencing and some other programs as well to get women back onto their feet.
Mhm.
And that has always been a really precious ministry to me. And so that's one of the ways that I spend my time when I'm not working
Yeah,
is investing in Fresno in that way. So.
yeah. Ooh, I love that. Love that you're able to say like this is how the work that I do is investing. But personally, I also found a place to say like this matters and this matters outside of what I do to get paid, and I want to invest in that. Love, wow, chef's kiss. Anyone else?
And I think what's interesting about being retired is that you no longer have to worry about all those big plans and big
Mm,
ambitions you had. You
Mm,
can start doing some of the smaller things,
mm-hmm.
like listening to people.
Yeah.
And especially during COVID, I've spent more time calling people, sending cards,
Mm,
especially, I mean, at church, I'm on the Deacon's Memorial Reception Committee. Well, we haven't had a lot of big receptions. I think we're sort of starting to get back there again. But so here's been people that have lost somebody, and to be able to call them and talk to them
mm,
and spend time with them. Interestingly, some of my students who graduated, 20 years ago, still call occasionally and want some advice. I have one that I'm on her way home from work. She works nights, and every once in a while the doorbell rings about 7:30 because she gets off work at 7 o'clock in the morning, and she's tearing her hair out about something that happened. And I don't have to say anything. I just have to listen.
mm.
Sometimes, get some coffee and a muffin or something. But that sort of supportive role when
Yeah.
you're so busy doing all these big things you can't do, and it's
Yeah.
sort of a privilege to be able to do some of those things.
Yeah.
Mm, mm.
Yeah. So
Wow.
you were saying this, the thing that's going to our mind as you were speaking is investing in your neighbor. Like, and who is your neighbor? Everyone. And you're like, I'm listening to my old students. I'm calling people who have lost someone. It's like, so in this current season, investing in your neighbors, which is a beautiful,
Mhm,
beautiful thing.
mhm,
I'm saying,
mhm. Now let me just say that Pauline, God bless your heart for what you
yeah.
do. It's very
Right.
lovely. It's very
Yeah.
lovely to hear that what you do. Uh, so for me, that I was not born here. And,
Right.
I moved here in my early 20s, and then uh, Fresno has given me everything,
Mhm.
everything from
Mm.
my higher education to meeting my wife and then having a daughter here. So Fresno has become a home away from home,
Mm.
So I consider this as my home, and then because also God calls me to pray and then to invest for the place where I am, where I've been blessed.
Yeah.
So I have also find my ways to be a blessing to somebody else in Fresno. And for me, again, it comes in a form of the work that I do with victims and offenders. For those of you who are maybe familiar, maybe knows a little bit more about court system, it's not the happiest place to be. Nobody wants to go there. Nobody want to hang around there. I mean, when you get a letter from court, everybody, we panic,
Mm.
That's just our default sentiment, at least. But for me, I think bringing some sort of humanity in the criminal justice system.
Yeah.
I think that's where I see my investment in Fresno. Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I've you see people lost, not knowing what to do, what's next, what has yet to come, and then and just being caught up in the system.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the other hand, you have also victims who are waiting for justice, but yet at least have yet to see justice,
Yeah.
and then also getting caught up in the system as well. And what I try to do is just trying to bring some humanity, just try to remind people that they matter, and then that we are here as a community member. At least for me, as someone who have been welcome in this community, I can say that as a community, we can come to them and then support them and figure out ways to resolve whatever harm that has been caused in the community.
Yeah.
Because what we tell them is, when those crime occurs, when harm are caused, it's not only that one specific human being who suffers, it's the entire community that suffers. And as a community, how do we come along and then uplift and support one another, hold people accountable, and then go about restoring, the victims. So that's how I see me investing in a place that has given me more than I deserve. So yeah.
Wow.
Mhm.
I love the language you use because one thing when I moved to Fresno, I think it was interesting to see the language of like how people were talking about Fresno change. It felt like I just came at this I wasn't here before, so I'm like, oh, I can see the language changing, and so to hear you say this place has given me so much, so I'm giving it back, and knowing that that's why we're still investing in it.
Yeah.
Friends, I can talk to y'all all day, and I appreciate the work that you are doing in the fields that you're in. But the great thing is that we don't have all day. We only have so much time. But I would love for each of you to tell us any advice or wisdom you're giving folks to like who are seeking to make any season of work purposeful. What advice or wisdom would you pass along? Who would like to start us? Don't want to put you on the spot or anything.
I'll start because I learned things a long time, hard times. I think what helped me a lot was to realize that I really wasn't working for that boss. I was working for God. That comes straight out of Ephesians. I'm doing this for God, which means that I do the absolute best I can in the job. And the other thing, I am also an ambassador. And the way I treat people reflects on who Christ is.
Wow.
So you show gratitude. You are honest. You do your job. You don't take credit for something somebody else does.
Yeah.
And that's been a very, very important thing.
Yeah.
In working, it made work a whole lot better. When you have this awful boss and you think, why should I do that for you? You never care anyway. Well, God cares.
Yeah. Amen. Whew. Yeah. Oh. Anyone else?
How do you follow that?
I know.
No,
Seriously.
Pauline, you definitely hit the nail on the head with that for sure. For me, I really try to, and this is kind of echoing what I said earlier, I really try to make sure that everybody at work, I mean, we all have, I've been very, what's the word, like, not privileged. I've been very privileged to be able to work in all aspects of our company. And I've been able to see how basically everything works and intertwines. And I think where I'm at today is I really try to put people in certain areas to make sure that their strengths are really shown and they can make work better for them. And this season right now that we're in as a whole in the company, like it's a really weird time. We're coming right off of COVID. We have really awesome plans for future growth and expansions that I think have never really been possible, believe it or not, before this. And we're also coming out of a season of change. We've had some personnel changes, and that's been very tough as a whole for our company. And I really feel that God put me in that place in this moment during this time, of year, to help us get through that, because it's been a pretty a drastic change. And so now my main focus is intentionally talking to as many of my employees as I can, making sure they understand that what they think and what they say really does matter, and what they do every single day, and really trying to uplift them, to get them to understand that we all have a job to do, and the way you do it is really important. And so let's try to get better at what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know, yeah, it's just a really interesting season at the moment. So I really feel that, coming out of COVID, it's just going to get better and better for us.
Thanks, Bert.
Yeah. I would say that for those who are entering work, I will encourage them to continue to seek God, and then to help them at least find a place where they can fulfill their dreams, or find purpose on their call. So that's for those who are perhaps maybe preparing to enter work. For those who are already in the work field and then maybe want to find purpose in this interesting year, I will really just tell them a word of encouragement that the work matters. You might think that you work at Amazon and then all you do is just to assemble, package. Your work still matter. Your work still matter, because in our truth, a package that's not assembled does not get delivered, and when it does not get delivered, there is no happy customer. So so that's just a reality. So that's just to say that even in a small role that you might have, or the bigger role that you have, your work still matters. And then no matter where you are, working in a big company or small company, I think your work still matters wherever God has placed you. I think you do your best, as Pauline said, it's God gift, and you make sure that you are fully representing the God that you claim you are part of. So
yeah, amen. Thank you, Saya. Kaylin.
Yeah, I mean, all of those things resonate so much. I agree with all of that. And one of the things that stands out, it's probably just me speaking to a younger me, but that's how this goes. Bring your whole self, know your weaknesses, know your strengths, and the ones you don't know, as you figure out along the way, surrender them to the Lord, and He brought you where you are, and have confidence in that. So if you have any kind of struggle with imposter syndrome, which, I mean, it's just a very real thing. I can't say don't, but even look at that honestly as well within yourself, and within the context of where God has brought you from, and where He's brought you to, and how He's using you in your workplace. And whether that's your dream job, whether that's your startup job, whether that's somewhere in between, you have a role there that's really important, and you have things to learn, and you have things to give in that space. So bring your whole self. You'll be surprised.
Yeah. Well, friends, I am privileged and honored that I got to spend this time with you. I'm thankful for each of you in the ways that you are bringing the kingdom of God back here to Fresno. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the ways that you are loving your work and letting us know the work matters. And for those of you who are tuning in and listening to this moment, I hope you were encouraged. I know there were a lot of moments that I was trying to take notes and listen at the same time. I was trying to be a good host. Sorry if it didn't flow well. There was a lot of good moments here, a lot of good nuggets from these friends. And so I'm going to watch it again. So you feel free to watch it again too. So thank you for your time. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. Thanks, friends. Thank you so much to our panelists for taking time to explain to us their heart and their vision about why they love their current season of life. And friends, that's the end of session 1. You made it. Good work. No, there are 2 more sessions, and the next session is going to be a series of quick talks, and I can't wait to see you there.